Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Are you working on a production right now? Have you got productions?
What we're involved in at the moment, we're working harder than ever worked in their life. Longer hours, weekends, nights, till morning. And all of it has to do with that we're dubbing our present Beanie and Cecil cartoons into all foreign languages. Into French, for example, at the moment. We're just on the third one of them, and when we get back, we have the rest of them to do.
Gee.
Huh?
Yeah. So how old are those shows?
Oh, they were ran on the American network from 62 through 67, 1962, and we just sold them to Mexico for the national network in Mexico, the national network in Argentina. We have sold them to London. They're on in London now, and we sold them to French Canada, and it's very interesting. In Spanish, Beanie and Cecil, they call it Benito and Cecilio. But in French, they call it, I'm trying to say it as it's pronounced in French, and I'll never make it, but... Boudicou and Cassicou. They say, I'm coming with the shoe, Only doesn't say I'm coming. And it's kind of cute. It's rhythmic, and the voices, the French voices, are very expressive. The villain is.
Where are they being dubbed?
In Montreal.
In Montreal, really?
Yeah.
Some good talent.
Good talent, and the villain, he is the worst, meanest guy you ever saw. Twice as villainous as when you heard our regular voice on him.
Really?
Yeah. And then they have cute little voices, like Little from Buffalo Billy or Little Ace from Outer Space. They got these real cute little things in it. They sing up to a high note, a little ant going off his feet. Well, they all those funny little things in it. It's next time we see you, we'll bring one print up, 1 half hour. You might enjoy seeing it. Yeah. But we're involved with planning on other things, and there's one large company there that wants us to help them set up on a new production, animated production.
Really?
Yes, it's a live action outfit that has this. So we have a lot of things happening. So.
Great.
Yeah. But I'm really interested that you're in seeing your procedures now. I don't suppose, in other words, with what you're doing now with your feature and all this stuff, if there was other films, would you really be able to take time to do some other things if there was some?
Well, we want to do other things because it takes so long and it's so unpredictable trying to, negotiate and raise the money for the next production. And if we had something that would come in on a regular basis, that would be something that we're actually looking for.
Do those over a little longer period.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like Richard Williams has been making the feature of his now between things for some time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know what he was doing.
That's a Persian
He does a lot
story.
of commercials and that sort of thing. We've never done commercials. We've never gone after them at all.
Yes.
I will get an invitation to bid on one from time to time, and as Judith knows, we'll submit the bid. But I've begun to realize that it's just a token thing. That they know Leach doesn't do commercials. They just want to hear what they have to say. And
Yes.
how much? Yeah.
Right.
And we seldom even hear back.
Here's the other one.
Yeah.
Yes, his chair's there.
Karen? Yeah. Bob Clampett and Sodi Clampett.
Where did you get that?
Oh, friends of mine are making.
You make them? Yeah, that's great. Friday night, we're just going to run some Felix's over at the Festival. We're on this television show he got us on this morning, and the guy insisted on calling it the Animal Festival.
Well, this is the Animation Festival. Getting as far as anima and stumbling. Sean, get right in.
Thought it was going to be a dog show or something.
That was a hectic morning.
Two programs in different places.
We're all in the same studio.
Thank goodness for that, yeah. Thing is, we flew in from Hollywood last night, you know, and there's 3 hours difference. So when we got up this morning, it was actually 3 in the morning, you know, and we had a short...
Oh, you were on Canada AM, so you had to get up early to
Yeah.
go there. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we were on Canada AM when it was like 4 o'clock for us in the
Right.
morning, and
Right.
something else at 5, you know, and I felt like I'd been hit in the head. I just didn't bounce at all.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
So it's now sort of
But
early evening
But
for
there
you.
was a mention of your studio on our show. On Toronto today. Huh? I'm not going to tell you. I have to.
Did you get that call in so we can write it down?
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't come tomorrow, it'll come somewhere sooner or later. I come up with a good one for a chum interview about Animal Diesel. It's something to the extent that Leach Rankin is in the backyard with me and anyway, I told you from the phone. Oh, that's great, so she told John. We gotta have that, so we found out that they didn't use that part and they erased it.
We had a press release ready, and now we got to do a little rapid editing on it, restructure, rewrite. We got to, keep sending out little shots and letting
Sure.
the world know what we're doing.
Sure.
We've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, it's no use laying a golden egg and not anybody know about it.
Yeah, for sure.
I used to be against publicity from an ethical standpoint, you know, and I later
I have-
found how foolish that was.
Yeah, I have little moral wars going on sometimes, but hell, if you don't do it, then you just, you die, that's all. So
Right.
you got to do it. Try to do it tastefully and truthfully, but
Oh, you get cranes.
then it's no fun,
I had Jane Jacobs, was one of my oldest customers. And the first time I saw Jane was the 3rd week that I was on my own screening South Films. She asked me to get Roxy Hart, Ginger Rogers. I'd never heard of Roxy Hart, and barely heard of Ginger Rogers at that time. And for 10 years, every time I saw Jane, she said, get Roxy Hart. And I would call 20th Century Fox and say, get a print of Roxy Hart. I did that for 10 years, and finally I got so used to having somebody call up and say, get Roxy Hart, and it built up the image that somebody had demand for Roxy Hart. So he dropped it, and I handed it to him. A couple $1,000. They were run off, especially for us, for one presentation. So I said, Jane, you've got Roxy Hart, but you really have to come up and introduce it. And Jane's very shocked. She doesn't like going out in public. And I thought, well, now that Jane's come up, what we're supposed to do is do this great big exploitation style campaign on a women in film circuit. I thought, I can't do that to Jane. There's no way I can fill this theater full of people who are going to think that she's God introducing Roxy Hart. So I just did it the other way. 8 people for Roxy Hart. But it was nice. It was really nice.
intimate little screening like that.
Yeah.
Sure, with all these people enjoyed it.
We were on percentages, so it didn't matter. We weren't going to get stuck with an enormous bill. But I've never been able to figure out since what to do with Roxy Hart. I hope that poor guy at least that he's screening something.
We have close friends in Hollywood that actually they live in Toluca Lake, and they have access to most of the vaults of all the feature pictures from all time. In fact,
Wow.
they've been helpful in financing certain things, and they have a theater in their home, a 100-seat theater with the original Paramount pipe organ in there. Yes, if any of you come down, we would like to take you there for a weekend evening, on a Saturday night. And so, therefore, if you had something you wanted to see, they usually can get their hands on it. You see them have special showings. And this Paramount organ was when Silent Pictures went out and talkies came in, Paramount Studio brought this organ in and they recorded for a year or so, they recorded a score to some of their pictures.
Oh, right, yes.
That were still
That
silent.
were still silent, yes,
yeah. And then they bought this thing, and it's they get Gaylord Carter in there, and then we'll run an early Harold Lloyd movie or something, and he will do it with the organ.
Oh.
you would like
Yeah.
it, John.
Yeah.
Tell me, is there anything that you have an interest in that I might have some information on? I wish you just don't bring up anything at all, but
Yeah.
Hard to pick anything specific.
that's a cop-out, isn't it?
Oh, well, one could ask you to start at the beginning and, gosh, telling us about what it was like the early days of Warner Brothers.
Would that be of any value to any of you? Would you be
Well,
interested?
in terms of value, I'd like to know how you would, I don't know, maybe you could compare what you know of as an animation production technique as against what you know of what we're
What
doing.
you're
Like
doing.
we're animating directly on cell, for instance, and
Yes.
I, quite frankly, don't really know much about any other way.
Uh-huh.
I guess you guys do actually, because you've been to school and all that. They probably, I don't know. What do you do?
Well, have you ever done straight on cell?
Straight on cell? I tried it once, but that was slippery, yeah. No, I'm kidding.
And did you cutouts?
Pardon?
Cutouts.
Oh, yes, I've experimented with all those things,
Like
but
this way.
you like that, yes.
Straight shooting another camera, no jump cuts.
Yeah, right.
That's
The first thing, back to what he said, I could tell you about is, I just saw your camera, which is nice in its simplicity, I like it. When I first started at Warner Cartoons, you will see in the slideshow that we will show it at Reg's Affair, shots of this camera, but this camera that Walt Disney owned in Kansas City, and he used to he would have it on his cartoon stand, and then he would go around town and take newsreel shots with it for the local theater to make side money.
Oh, yeah.
Harmonizing bought this camera from him, and when I went to work at Harmonizing, this was that original Disney Kansas City camera on a stand, which had no zooms, no come down at all. It was just, just like boards up there. It was sitting up there, and you pulled a chain like it was an old time toilet chain to shoot a frame. You see.
Really?
And so
Really?
first months I was there, I would come back at night and shoot things on this camera, not really realizing its history at that moment.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And then that camera that shot the first 3 years of Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, then when Leon Schlesinger took us over on the Warner Brother lot in 1933, that camera became the test camera, and we shot all of our pencil tests on that for the rest of the years. That was that same camera. But back to how did they get zooms? Did you ever see the early Mickey Mouse called Plane Crazy? I've seen it. It was the third Mickey was actually the second one made silent and then ran third. And in there they had the plane doing a zoom down, like it was going to hit the ground. This was when the camera was just on wooden poles. They had no zoom.
Yeah.
And what they did was Ub Iwerks figured this out. He made a large background of the ground, and they put it down on the camera stand. They took the frame, and then Roy Disney was helping shoot camera, and they would just put something on it, like paper and books and so forth, and little by little, it would move up, and they would turn the cardboard, and you have this marvelous spin, which shows, it just gives an example of what you can do. You don't have to have a multiplane camera to get your ultimate effects, you see.
Yeah, yeah. We find ourselves doing things
Yes.
because we have no recourse. We just don't have some of these.
So you'll find a good way to do it.
It's got to be some way somehow.
And in a way, what you're talking about, drawing directly on cells and all of that seems quite good, in that you're doing something original and not saying, hey, we have to do it exactly the way they're doing it at Hanna-Barbera and so forth. That's a big plus that your pictures have a different look. Have a different look. Yeah.
How would you go about it if you were starting out, with animated characters, and how would your studio do what what we do? What would be your process?
Well, I would never have thought of doing what you're doing. You see, drawing on cells and then the backgrounds that Barry is making, and there the photograph things from books and the colored Xerox, all that's quite original. And I think that's great that your films will have this different look, and still it's a rich look. It's not just I thought, well, maybe if it's just on cells, it's going to have colored paper behind it, it's going to look sort of empty. But then when I see the backgrounds, I see that it's going to be quite rich in detail and still very imaginative the use of the color. I think that's wonderful. Because the biggest problem, I think, in the studios today is that everything is starting to look alike. If you turn on your television, I don't think you can tell on Saturday morning when you're seeing the Patty Freeling, Hanna-Barbera Filmation. If you first just get a flash of it, the backgrounds are all done the same way. Like, yeah, Barry... Pardon?
One handmade.
Yes.
Similar.
It could all be from the same studio. And of course the animators do move around, but that's not the reason for that. The direction comes from the head, creative person. And now on the backgrounds there, they learned a few years back to make rocks by taking a sponge, and gray and white paint, and then, putting it on. It made a nice rock. But now they use this effect all the time, or they don't even get to that much detail anymore, you see. So I think that it's well worth pursuing the way John's doing is, and he told me an interesting thing about your animation, how he will give you the layouts to work with, and then many times you'll come back with maybe a better way of doing something, which he encourages. I think that's wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, I'm all for that. How would your way contrast with our way?
Well, in other words, I've worked various ways over the years.
What ways?
Well, you want me to tell about how I made a Warner
love to
cartoon,
know.
and you'll be disillusioned in this because it's so different.
That's okay.
All right.
It'll help illuminate what we're doing, and give us some ideas. Because the reason we do it this way is we don't know how to do it any other way.
May I do this? Well,
Do you need anything
no,
like
I
this?
just have to move my chair where I can see everybody without doing an owl like I'm doing this.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Could you sit over here and sure, I can sit over where I can see it.
Looks like a little chair. Yeah.
First time you can see over
John said, well, tell us how you make a Warner cartoon. Well, that was a unique kind of a situation. It was unlike any other studio, for the reason that at Disney's, all during the early years, Walt was the only real director.
Really?
Yes, he was the director on the shorts and up through the first 4, 5, 6 features. Then of course, then Walt got involved in outside activities, live action movies, parks, and so forth.
Right.
But his directors, a Walt Disney director was a very good man, but he was a man whose main thing was to capture what Walt had in mind, if possible, and carry it out. And the director didn't originate the stories at Disney's. In other words, the story department under Walt would originate the stories, and then the director would come in only at the end. He'd be assigned a story, almost like in feature pictures, where he would come in at the end of the story thing and get the feel of it, and then he would carry it through layout and timing, and did a wonderful job, but he didn't have freedom. He was all the time concerned with what does somebody else want, you see. Now, there were other studios, at the time that had different systems that they didn't, the other studios didn't really have a Walt Disney, that type of guy that had such a good story mind and such a feel for moving things forward in art and so forth. But at Warner's, Leon Schlesinger was a man who had a sense of theater to him. He'd been a booker for, like, vaudeville acts, His first job was to be the barker. In the early days of movies, they had a railroad train. And you go in, buy tickets, and sit on the railroad train, and they had movies of the scenery going by. You see, and his first job was to call out what you were seeing on the thing. So he had a certain feeling for the theater. And for, as I say, he bought a relax and writing publicity and so forth. But he knew he wasn't a writer. He knew he wasn't a cartoonist. He knew he wasn't a director. So he, therefore, his system was very much like, say, Jack Warner's was for the live action pictures, and that was to try to find the directors that he would give full responsibility to. He would hopefully out of all these people hire or bring up from the ranks a man who he could depend on to think up the story with the help of a gag man and carry it through to the end, and he wouldn't usually see it until the picture was shown to him silent. Yes. Now that kind of freedom turned out wonderful for some of us, because when we got the position of having that trust and having the freedom to make what we wanted to try out, we'd make mistakes, we'd do some things that weren't so good, but when we hit on something good, you see, it might be quite original for its time, because it wouldn't be just something done by committee, it would be something copied from someplace else, you see. So, I liked that system. It was good for me, because when I first came to harmonizing, I'd been a cartoonist, as some of you maybe have. You know, as a youngster, I had pictures in the paper and so forth. And I always had the thing, well, if you're going to do a comic strip, well, you think up the character, you think up the story, and you draw it, you know? And I thought, well, when you get to animation, you'll be able to do the same thing. And then when I got there, they said, no, you don't do any of that. You just sit over here and you in between, you see? And I said, well, that's all I want to do, you know? So I said, how do you get to where you can get your own idea on the screen? So to do that, you have to be a director. So then about the third day, I said, well, that's what I got to be as a director. So it took me 2 years to get there. But that was the idea. But fortunately, in the early days, I was telling you a lot of things that would lead to your question, John. In the early days of harmonizing, they didn't have a story department when I started there. And so the first week, as I mentioned earlier, I was able to be given animation right away. And then 2 nights a week, they would call us back. And it was a small group like you have here, John, which is wonderful. So they'd call us back for a gag session on the next picture. So while we're working on the first Merry Melody, we're coming back for story sessions on the second cartoon, second Merry Melody. And so we would come back after dinner. There was no extra pay, but I always looked forward to that, because there, little by little, you get some ideas on the screen. It's in that manner, even though you weren't a director. So I just kept turning in gags. I kept turning them in, and I just had more of a knack for that, more for ideas than other fellows were stronger in other things, you see. So when Schlesinger took over from harmonizing 3 years later, he said to me, I understand that you've got a knack for that, for ideas and so forth. So he says, if you'll come with me, I'll give you a chance to learn to be a director. Because he was looking for directors. He first hired Tom Palmer, who had been a top animator at Disney's in the early days. That Palmer was the original director. He hired Jack King, who I was assisting, who was the animator on the Three Little Pigs and so forth. And it originated, he had animated on the Mutt and Jeff cartoons in New York years before. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those. They were really cool. So, anyway, this thing of where I constantly was going out of my way to turn in ideas to him, sketch up stories, and so forth. There was no extra pay for it, but it paid off. And then at a certain point, he made me an assistant director, you know, to be a gag man to a director. And from that, then I got to be a director, you see. Now, we're to the point you're asking about how I work as a director, and everybody works a little different. Sure. Wouldn't even every director of Warner's with me this way, right? But I would usually think up the idea, not because maybe somebody else's idea wasn't as good or better, but just because I understood it better. You know, if I had an idea, I'd be consumed with it, and I would want to make that picture, you see. And I had wonderful guys that worked with me. Hopefully one of them will be here this weekend for John's show. His name is Michael Sassanoff. You might not have seen his name on his credits, but you might not know so much about him. But he was maybe my main collaborator during the years that I made the best films at Warner's. And he was a background artist. He was the layout and background artist. But then he was the only guy that took enough interest to help me at night on story. I'd say, hey, I'm gonna be working on story night. He said, I'll come back and work with you. So eventually, you'll see his name as a writer on the cartoons, and hopefully he will be here, and you'll meet him. But he's a very fine artist. So the way I would to work on the stories, I get this idea, and I think of all these ideas with Mike's help or whoever worked with me, or whoever. Think up all the ideas, and then you make, of course, the story sketches. The way we did was we made these little story sketches on the board. Now, when I look back at those sketches, now, to me, when I got a final storyboard, the whole thing was there in my mind. But now I look back at them, and it wasn't there on the board. You know, they were guideposts. You see, and many times in interviews, I'd say, no, we had this storyboard where every little thing was worked out, but it's not there in the sketches. You see, it's like the funny paper, you go from here to here. And what I would find is that in thinking out the characters' actions, I would do that at night. As we're going along in a story, I lived at the ocean front in Southern California. I would take long walks along the ocean at night, you know, with the wind blowing as hard, and I would act out as I walked along because there was nobody looking at you. And I would act out these stories. And mentally, you would find, well, gee, on the storyboard, you know, well, gee, the character goes from here, and he does this, and he does that. But then when you start thinking out the action, it's not there, you know. So you say, yeah, but there's a gap here. How does he get from here to here? And then you would always try to think up a little original ways of doing that, little original walks, and not so that it was just the standard thing. See, we always tried to make our stories unpredictable, things that would be little surprises and so forth. So in doing that and working over a period of weeks and weeks on a story and getting it polished down in your mind, then when you went to and you'd write the dialogue, and by that time you would hear those voices. In most cases, you would know just how you wanted that to sound. Now when you call in Mel Blanc, he would never be at our story meetings. He would meet us over, we'd call him and say, hey Mel, we're going to record now on Monday, and he would meet us over at the soundstage. Is that for me? Sure. Thank you very much. I'm already frothing at the mouth and there's no So when you would go to the soundstage, that would be the first time that Mel would see the script, see the dialogue. And naturally, he wouldn't know the little nuances, you know, the little pause when Bugs Bunny's talking, and you have a little pause because you know in the storyboard what the action's going to be. So you would have read-throughs with Mel and other fine voice people who were using, but then you would have to give them that direction, you see, on shading. Many times when we get up I would stand up at the microphone with Mel, both of us with the script, and he would say, well now, what's the timing on this? So I would say the line in front of him, and of course he would do it much better, but he would therefore parrot the timing and so forth. You see?
So he'd get the feeling and the pacing from you and just
but and then if something wasn't the way we wanted it to be, then I'd explain to him, try it this way and so forth. So we would get our recording that way. See?
Right.
Then I would take the storyboard into, like Carl Stallings was a wonderful musician. He had started in Kansas City with Disney. You'll see it in our show, playing movies, you know, playing the piano or the organ in the pit. So he had this great knack for that. And when Walt was back there working at film ads, he'd bring these little animated things down to the theater after the show, and Carl would put music to them. And a few years later, Carl's the musical director of the first Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphonies, you see, but they had that great background in theater. And so here was Carl Stallings, and I would take my storyboard into his room and act it out for him, go through the thing from start to finish. And so he, for the first time, saw the feeling of the story, what was funny, what happened, and so forth. Then I would go back, he would say, well, tell me more, and I would go back through and give him the change in mood, like we wanted a softer quality here, and then we break out of that and we do this, or this is heavier music. And then once he started doing, he would make suggestions. He'd sit at the piano and he would look at the thing and he would say, how about this? And he'd play a little tune for you. He'd say, hey, that's just right for that, you know. Then we'd mark it on the board and say, we'd put down the tempo, 2/8 or whatever, and the tune. Sometimes he'd clap and listen and he'd copy the tune. sometimes he would play a thing and say, well, really what we needed there was more of this. And then he'd say, oh, well, maybe something more like this. And then maybe by trying 3 or 4 things, then we'd arrive at it, you see. Now, we would not always get every inch of film preset that way, but we would set, with Carl at the piano, we would set the tempos and write them on the storyboards, the tempos of each sequence or each change of sequence, which I'm telling guys a lot of things I'm telling you is what you may be doing.
Similar, but not the same.
Not
Not the
the
same
same.
at all. It's very interesting. Did you have people like Stallings and Mel Lang and so on staff at all times? Were they available to you at any time?
Was available at a point. He made an exclusive deal with Leon, which meant, see, what he was interested in was never cartoons, it was radio. He wanted to be in radio. And only as a last resort, as his wife once told me, they were just about, he tried to get in radio, and it was difficult, because it was, they don't have everybody they're used to using it. And they were just about to give up the ghost and go back to, where is it, Seattle? No, Seattle, Oregon, or Washington, I'm sorry. Whatever, yeah. But it's way up there, several states north of California. So she said, well, listen, why don't you just do anything, maybe do cartoons or something. That's the way they looked at it, you see. And so, actually, Mel had a relative that worked at KFWB next to us, next door to our, on the Warner lot. But it took him about a year or so to even get in, because the guy that chose the voices said, well, we got everybody we need and so forth. But he did get in, and I sat there the first morning that we auditioned him, It's like you and several of you guys sit there and say, well, okay, now here's another guy we're going to listen to. We used to listen to 5, 6 a week at least.
Really?
Yeah. And the setup we had was we had in the big projection theater where it would seat all the Schlesinger staff. We had a big screen there, of course, and then a little door to the side of it that went behind or beside the screen, and there we had the microphone. And then that microphone would come out through the speakers of the theater. The reason that we did that, we didn't want to look at the person because somebody might look funny as the Dickens, and the voice wouldn't do it, or vice versa, you see. So we would just hear the voice. And that first day, Tex Avery and I was writing a story. We were writing a story at that time called Picador Porky, in which we had a couple of tramps who get into a bull suit, and then they reach out and get a bottle of hooch, you might have seen it, and they drink, and they start hiccuping. See, and that's what we had in the story. So Mel did all these voices that he had done up in radio in Portland or wherever it was, and so they weren't anything that you know now. They weren't any of the character voices you know now. They were good, but they weren't anything that we saw immediate use for. But the one thing that he did was that he did these one little thing of hiccups. He had really good, juicy, bouncy hiccups. So then at the same time, there was another thing happening. You see, we had a fellow, from the time we started Porky Pig, we had a fellow that did the voice that actually stuttered. And his name was Joe Doherty. And there was criticism from the PTA about the stuttering voice, but really Joe was more of a stammerer. He really stammered. He couldn't help it. He had to do it. Whereas for our comedy effects, it wasn't quite right. In other words, we wanted to do little twist jokes and things. So we said to Mel 2 things. One is, after the meeting, I said, hey, we got a thing with hiccups in it. Maybe you can do the hiccups for us, you see. And then Drake Brown and I and this other fellow also talked to him about the Porky voice. Could he match the Porky voice? And we ended up giving him the disc to take home and listen to. And so his first, initially, just tried to match it so he wouldn't notice a change. And then, of course, he did it much better. So that's the way Mel came into the picture. But then his idea was, look, I'll do this for my side money, just to keep going. But I want to spend my time trying to get into radio. So he never was at the studio as such. he was on call, he'd be around doing radio shows and promoting, but anytime we needed him, as many times a year as we needed him, then he would come, meet us over, not in Hollywood where the studio was, but over at the Warner Burbank studio, where we did our recording.
Right.
So that's the way it worked.
Yeah. So I love that idea of those story sessions like that, because now we already have our voices down. They've been done, and the way we operate, we haven't been able. We can't afford to keep people on staff, and while we're recording, because there's nothing for them to animate. So we have to get the voices down first, so that we're limited to that extent. But now, especially the way some of the guys are interpreting the scenes, I'd like to see us have. This is the first time I think we've actually sat down. There's so much been, just moving here in 2 weeks, it's been kind of hectic. But I would like to have sessions like that where we can throw a scene on the floor and
Would you
see what we
enjoy
make.
that?
Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Sure, yeah. Love it. Yeah.
Now, maybe somebody, I don't think she'd want to come to the story session. You let her go home. I saw the expression in the face like, oh my God.
Janina knows how to take a complicated animation concept and make it work technically.
Wonderful.
It's just unbelievable.
Yes.
We were working on a crowd scene on the last production, and I think if we had done it our way, it would have taken us 2 months, and it would have totaled up to about 50,000 people. If you added up all of the cell. And Janina sort of synthesized the movement and the requirements, and made it into layers. And there was our crowd scene. It was done in about 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, Ron, but I worked so long time in animation.
Sure, well, this is where she's so valuable.
And
But
you know who made...
to come to a story session, maybe that's not necessary. She just deal with the problems that we create
Right.
for her.
First time it's done a big studio in Moscow, it was 40 or 45 years ago. They ordered it was some lady from Disney studio, I don't know her name, and she made an order exactly. And until today, it's working.
Is that right?
Exactly like studios from
Yes.
Disney. Yes,
Right.
same order, like it's like big factory.
Yes.
Drawings, inking, pencil test, and painting,
All of the same.
story department,
Yes.
and plus checking department like Russian government. Extra.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
It is
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, maybe Janina will begin to influence us.
I can understand you
And
also.
it's sort of full circle. As some of our Canadian guys go down to California and work down there, the influence
Yes.
started off in Disney, going halfway
All
around
the
the
way
world
around.
and then back to Canada and then
Yeah.
all back again. And they've,
I still have explained you many things which I know. And I didn't explain to you.
yeah, right.
It wasn't time.
Yeah.
But as you say, really, it's not necessary. The people that should be in a story should not be the person that has to worry about the production, because you're going to say, oh,
Right.
geez, oh my God, no, don't do that,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And at a story session, it should be where you feel free to say
Wide
the
open.
silliest thing in the world,
Yeah, right.
even if you
Yeah.
look ridiculous, you say it, get it out, and
Yeah.
it might lead to something else.
That's right. That's right.
I remember my feeling when I came you first in the last production. I looked to you and I thought, how these people can work in a terrible order where everything mixed, like nothing can be in the life disorder. Like someone drew some pen, another took it, and
Yeah. Yeah.
all mixed up.
Organization has never been my forte. So that's why I need Janina to keep things under control. This production is very different in feeling, but we've only been going 2 weeks. It's too soon to say. But I've never had anything start off with such promise.
You talked about how you had the opportunity, even before being able to become a director, to get some input into what was going on.
Yes.
And of course you jumped at it. And I'm sure there are lots of people
who would, naturally here and down there in California. Today, in the studios down there, are they getting any opportunity to do that
Very
as well?
little. No, it's like the chart now. You know, this is the story department, and the person that's in animation doesn't have that chance for input. Now, that is no good. That is a shame. You have that possibility here because you're not yet a giant factory.
Yeah. I've got letters from kids who've gone down to California to work down there, and got letters from them begging to come back and work
Yes.
for us at much less salary.
Yes.
I
think they
wondered
would-
about that.
Yeah, they would like it, yeah. Because, you know, I said to John, your friend John Cricklucci, how do you like filmation, you know? It's all right. You know, well, that's not filmation. I'm sure you don't say that when you go out of here and say, how do you like it? At Leach, you know? What do you say?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I can see some guys that should be in your nighttime meetings here too.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
You feel more a part of it. You feel a part of it.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
In the early days at Disney's, they used to do that same thing. They go to Walt's house and they have a big jar of nothing jelly beans, I think it was, on the middle of the table, and they'd sit around the table and think up the stories. You see, that was before there was story departments or gagmen, you know. And
Before speed and LSD.
Now it's beans, but not jelly.
you know, on my university tours, and John made me think of it, that so many times they will say to me, did you ever have anything to do with Fantasia? And I say, well, not really, but I used to go over and see the pencil tests and saw the statues being made, you know, the alligators and the hippopotamuses and all that stuff. So I was around there, and I remarked about the pencil tests, how some of the things that were all in it was when you had line drawing, I mean, a lot of sketch lines and so forth. And the thing just was alive on the screen. And when you saw the thing inked and painted, you lost that.
Yeah.
So when Xerox came in, I thought, well, gee, that's going to be good because it'll capture that sketchy drawing. But then,
Right.
of course, what they do now is they
You clean it all
They
up
clean it up
before
with
they
the
Xerox.
drawings so you don't get the damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Right? We're drawing on cells, those sketch lines are in there. So
yes, it can be.
don't make it so clean. Get filthy.
This your first production
Wait a
looks
minute.
fresh.
That's right.
Because you
Yeah.
see some sketchy
Yeah.
style, not that line, you know, like doing very professional inking people on the
Right.
It's little bit silly.
Yeah.
And
The first production, I did all the animation in it, a half-hour show, because I didn't realize there was so much work involved, and we didn't have any money, and so on. So I just drew it all myself. I didn't know any better in a way, you know. And I used frosted cells, so I couldn't use layers that way because it just went foggy.
yes.
And I drew with pencil on the frosted cell, and they painted the back of it, and that was it. You know, I had a couple of painters. And, but I just, you know, drawing very, very fast. I did 15,000 drawings in about 4 months, you know. And, and I'm always a little ashamed of it because it looks, it isn't, you know, polished and everything, but when people see it, I get nice responses.
It's nice
It has pretty lame production values, you know, but it's fresh and it's got that. Well, you guys saw it the other day, and the drawings are bad, but they're alive, you know.
And this
And
a
we
little
can
bit
use
lost
it.
in the next night out. Like,
That's right. In Winter's Night Out, we were more professional, and we got better advice, and we got professionals working for us. We had a bigger budget, and everybody knew that you always work it out on paper first, and you do it on the cell, make it all clean. And I had to admit it looked slicker, but it lost the pizzazz.
And another thing, John,
This is really, you know, please, I don't forget what he just said. That's the most valuable thing, you know. It's just magic.
I'm
You know?
glad somebody mentioned something that made me mention Fantasia, and I was getting to another point, which I'll get back to in a minute. But speaking about the line thing, as you were saying, it can be used to not just be that it's rough drawings, but to be used to give an effect of movement and so forth. In other words, you can make use of those rough lines to further the movement.
Sure.
Rather than
Yeah.
just saying, well, it's a technique, you see.
Yeah, right.
It can be used in the right spots to do that.
Yeah.
But back to the Fantasia thing, the university lectures that I give, they say, you were there, you know the people working on Fantasia, right. Then they very hopefully say to me, what were they on? Say, were they on this or that?
Yeah.
I say, I hate to disappoint you, but
Yeah.
it was pure inspiration. It was pure,
Right.
yeah.
They ask me that about you every time I show Wacky Land.
You know what Leon called them?
Don't say it out loud, there's girls present.
Well, it's been publicized.
Yeah, it's been written up in books, you can't escape it.
All right, you tell the rich.
No, so they started.
They called it Bob's Wet Dream.
See, it's not as funny as...
Which one was that?
Wacky
Oh, Wacky Land.
Porky and Wacky Land.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah. We'll be seeing that this weekend, right? Yeah.
You'll also be seeing pencil test of a sequence from Snow White that was never used.
Oh, nice.
Или pencil,
Yeah.
вот
In
этим.
pencil, yeah.
With all the production and music and everything.
Nice.
It was kind of...
How did you get a thing like that?
Well, there was a fellow in Brampton who had a copy of it. He wanted Buster Keaton in our hospitality. We have Buster Keaton in our hospitality. I said, well, instead of charging you a rental for the film, give me the pencil test.
How did he get it?
I don't know, I'm not asking. He's coming on Saturday.
Is he?
Yeah, right.
Don't
There's
say
more.
that.
One of the things that I brought with me is something that's just been newly discovered, and you'll see it on the Saturday night show if you're there, is the original thing that Harmon and Ising made, the Cell Looney Tunes. It was a 3-minute short in which Rudy Ising is at the drawing board and draws Bosco for the first time, like an out of the inkwell thing, and then they do this routine back and forth. It is the first synchronized talking cartoon. Steamboat Willie was the first synchronized music cartoon, but this was the first one in which the flip action was actually right to the frame. And this will interest you when you see it. What they did, they had read Ham Hamilton, who was a wonderful animator. You'll see him in the first little photo of Disney and Harmon and Ising, and Alice and so on. He saw a thing in like a Reader's Digest magazine or this and that, showing how talkies are made, and had a drawing of the soundtrack and a drawing of real people talking and how it worked. So he came in with the idea to Harmon, and Harmon brought Ising in, who was a good technical man. He said, well, look, if you can do that with people, why can't you do it with drawings, you see? And so they got that idea, and they started working on it actually before Disney started on Steamboat Willie. And they didn't finish it till after, but they took Max Maxwell, who I knew at the studio, he was the voice of Bosco on it, and they put him in blackface, you see, and as they recorded the dialogue, they actually filmed him, because they thought they had to get those lips exactly right, you see. And so when they animated right to the film of him speaking the lines. And it's very crude now, but it's got a lot of vitality to it, and you'll see it Saturday night. It's pretty interesting. They took that film to Schlesinger, who was in the title business. We took it to Warner's, and that's how Looney Tunes started with Bosco.
I don't know what you did about the Charlie McCartney puppet doll, puppet animation.
Would that be of interest to
It might not be as interesting what they're doing now, but in terms of the future, if you ever get into puppet animation, it would be really interesting to know.
Reg, what particular thing you mentioned?
The walking puppet. He used ball bearings.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It's an amazing piece of film because it's Charlie McCarthy, the doll, Edgar Wright, and Bob Fosse was a short or something with him. He animated the Charlie McCarthy doll. They have a long shots, and I saw it at Sheridan. It's just incredibly beautiful, totally natural.
at that time,
It is the actual puppet.
the actual figure, yes.
Yeah, it isn't a drawing.
This drawing. The idea I had at the time was Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy were big. Have you ever seen them or heard of them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they were tremendous successes on radio.
Yeah.
A ventriloquist act on radio. So, and then they had made a few shorts of Warner's Vitaphone shorts, you see, and but they were all, it'd be like Charlie and Edgar at the races, and they're just behind a pole, and there's no movement to it, you see. And so my idea was to make a series of puppet shorts, or a series of shorts of Charlie McCarthy, Mortimer Snerd, but give them the freedom of where not only could they do this good close-up stuff, the good personality of the dummy, or the real dummy, but then have the duplicate, which is essentially made like a King Kong is made, in other words, where you have your ball-bearing armature inside of it, so that the character, you can make it move and hold it in any position. You see, I still have that dummy in it at the studio, and this was 1938, about 38, and I set up this puppet studio across the street from Warner's, and Al Kendick, who was a quirky in-betweener with me, and he was a sculptor, and we invented a system. And basically, the system was a means of animating the figure and matching it up to the dummy, and therefore we were able to get the precision of animation in the puppet, which goes way beyond the normal thing where you just guess at it. And so we shot this, then we were going to cut close-ups of the Charlie and Mortimer and go back and forth, you see. And so we made this thing, and then I was under contract exclusive to Leon, so we could only do it if he accepted it. And as it was, he said, well, we're making 40 cartoons a year, and I don't think we should take our time to be doing puppets. But as Reg said, we will show part of that footage or something similar Saturday night, and it might be something you find useful. I can show you more about it.
Would be ours. It's already got ideas perfect.
Yeah, who knows? I'm finding myself more and more interested in dramatic just entertainment as opposed to the medium of it. Even if it requires puppets, then we'll use puppets, and whatever it requires, to convey whatever the thing is. The medium is flexible as anything. One thing I'm not very interested in yet is live action. That doesn't seem to move me very much. It's so limited to what's possible. Animation is just limited by nothing at all.
Yeah. The great thing in animation is that you yourself on that little piece of paper can control exactly what you want it to be. You can't do that with live action. You got big sets and actors who see everything differently. It's nothing like it.
That's why I was thinking there's a tremendous affinity between music and animation.
Yes.
I was wondering actually why so many of the Warner cartoons have this musical theme.
Why so many of the Warner cartoons have what?
A musical theme. It's say voice opera.
Yes. Well, a certain number of them, from time to time, we would make what we call a musical cartoon. Of course, we started off being musical cartoons, Looney Tunes, Merry Melody. Of course, in the beginning of sound cartoons, it was that movement to the music and sound effects that was the big hit with the audience, you see. They'd been seeing silent films, and suddenly with that same movement and this great precision, whatever.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That was just sensational. Now, when you see
Yes,
it
wasn't just an accompaniment, it was in sync.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Right, in sync and just an integral part of the thing.
Right.
And of course, in the early days of talkies, this is kind of an interesting thing, but you'd be too young to know it and have seen it, but the silent moving picture had gotten a great technique. They had moving cameras and, they had a great scope to the silent film. And when talkies came in, suddenly the live action films were all nailed down where people were trying to talk into microphones that were hidden in bases, you see. And and so the whole thing, for the most part, became very static and lacking the movement of cinema technique. Now, it was at this moment that Disney comes out with the first synchronized sound cartoons. you see, in which everything was moving all around that screen. But not just moving, it was with great precision and to the sound of the music. And it made everything else look like it was standing still, you see. So at that moment, cartoons just was way past live action for the most part. When I first got into television, I ran into a similar situation, and Walt said to me, he says, your beanie puppet show, in a way, has the same kind of impact that my first Mickey's had. Well, it was almost the same thing, because television then was on little stages for the most part, indoors, and they didn't have backdrops, they didn't have the scope, and suddenly, with puppets, we were doing cartoon movements and cartoon actions, and the effect on the screen had that same great difference, you see. But I didn't mean to divert there. What were we talking about, John? We were getting to a point.
We had a number of things going on.
Music and cartoons, very.
The music and cartoons came from very.
So-
You were asking about the musical themes
Yeah.
of picking a specific piece of music
Right.
and creating a cartoon around that.
Thank you for getting us back on the track. So what I was going to say is that originally the Merry Melodies, as so many of you know, the Warners only gave the contract for Merry Melodies because Leon said to them, look, you own this big music publishing houses and you have the movie musicals. We will make these tunes even more popular and sell more copies and so forth.
Oh, because they already own the property.
Because they already own those songs, you see.
Right.
So when we make a thing...
It all comes down to money.
with some people.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, but happily, sometimes the money people's end results coincide with yours, then it's
Yeah.
fine. Then it works beautifully. So here was a case of where they had these songs, so we would constantly, every time somebody wrote a new song at Warner's for a musical, maybe a day or so later, we would have the sheet music copy there, and our musician would play it. So it was like Tin Pan Alley, where you were, here was all these new songs being played. And then you would say, oh, now that, we could do a story around that one, or we could use that in here. So a lot of tunes that are real popular are famous today. I heard the first time when they were right off the sheet copy, and they were just being prepared for the features, you see. So we made, Lady Play Your Mandolin, Merry Melody #1. That was a song written by Irving Caesar, who wrote No No Nanette, and also by Oscar Levant. That was written by them. The second, the one which you're running, Reg, in your show Friday night, is it?
Crosby, Colombo,
Well, no. Well, that was also from a song, and so also was Smile Darn You Smile, which was an old standard. That was our second Merry Melody, you see. So we, at the beginning, not only based the Merry Melody on a song, but we called it by that title, you see. The title of the cartoon was actually the title of the song. But as we went along with that, we found that the necessity of having a singing chorus in every cartoon hurt us many times. We'd maybe have a story concept and then you'd stop and do a singing chorus. It didn't make sense.
Right.
So we fought our way clear of that. And then, of course, the movie musicals also were petering out, so it all came about. So we went back to where we could not have to use music, not have to feature. But then we would get the desire to do a musical, whether it's a black musical, an opera, whatever, you see. So sometimes we would do those just because we thought it was an original idea. It wasn't by any particular pattern or design. Is that what you mean?
I just find a lot of animals are really interested in music, or musicians, and that's quite interesting too. Even sort of avant-garde people like McLaren, people like Alexia.
Yes.
They used to sing music and all.
Right.
That's interesting too.
Yeah, Kissinger, who started out doing cartoons to music.
Can you get over there?
And then just stopped using it after a while. The random decision. One of the things
They're
about
having a
Smile,
private conversation.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, very speak up. Into the microphone.
one of the things about Smile Darn You Smile that Bob neglected to mention, which is the second Merry Melody, is that he animated a short sequence in that on a streetcar, where the streetcar ads came to life, and that was such a hit in the theaters that it led to a whole string of cartoons with soapbox labels coming to life and book covers. And climaxed in one that he did called Book Review, where all these book covers came to life and chased Daffy Duck.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Reg. To be exact, I didn't animate the sequence, but that was, we're talking about the story sequences where when you're starting out, you come into the story conferences at night, story meetings. Well, the first week I was there, they had the story conference at night in which I suggested that concept. Now, when you see the cartoon, you'll see just a short little thing of that thing. I had drawn out a thing with caricatures of all the well-known advertisements, you see. And I did them not as animals, but as human figures. And the thing at that time is there had been books coming to life before, but there hadn't been the modern, up-to-the-minute satire on the advertisements, all the advertising figures. You see, that was a thing that was special about it. I have a letter to my mother and also to my art teacher about this, in which I described the original script that I turned in detail, which is much more extensive. And when they liked the idea, they decided to use it, but when they finally did it, they just laid it out as Smith Brothers and a few things as animals, and it was shortened down this much, and it didn't compare with the original concept. But in spite of that, it got just the basic idea of it got such a big hit in the theater. The reaction, as Reg said, that led us to doing the magazines coming to life and all of that, you see. So that was very helpful to me, because just as a kid, I was 16, I think. And it was the first week I was there, and here I came up with something that the bosses liked and used, and you see that was very beneficial.